Babe? Have you seen TV?
No, I haven't seen him since before the move.
What? Didn't he ride with you?
I thought he rode with you.
So, then this happened. Ugh.
We gotta get back to the past, to the 20th century. Digging through the bubble wrap into your memories. Back was the collector, he's protecting what we find. Relentless heavy metal guns keep us safe through time. RetroBlasting.
This is not a toy.
Just the corners of your mind. RetroBlasting. The stuff you love since you were 9. We're blasting into the past to see what thrills still last. RetroBlasting.
Mego had the market cornered on superhero toys for a full decade. Both Marvel and DC Comics heroes were in their stable, in multiple scales. But when Mego went bankrupt in 1982, DC and Marvel's merchandising arms went looking for new toy partners. It didn't take long. With names like Superman and Batman, you can bet interest was pretty strong. DC Comics found a new home with one of the best toy companies around, Kenner. Given Kenner's success with the Star Wars toys and the resulting success with the 3 3/4 inch figure scale that many other companies had used, including Mego with their own Pocket Heroes line, you might expect Kenner would roll the Justice League into that scale. But they didn't. Instead, they went to a much taller 4.5 inch height and added knee joints to boot. And they weren't the only ones. Mattel's Secret Wars line of Marvel superheroes were the same scale. It's as if the two companies had a silent agreement to make their superhero figures a unique but compatible scale. Kenner's effort on their DC Comics line is second to none. The colors were vibrant and the capes were real cloth, with all of the appropriate details, even Superman's yellow S, which is always omitted these days. This was 1984, the twilight of what is now known as the Bronze Age of comics, and the Kenner designs are a kind of definitive record of DC Comics' Bronze Age, with the card artwork pulled directly from the work of Jose Garcia Lopez, who literally defined the style guide for DC Comics in the first half of the 80s. Comics legend Jack Kirby was brought in to redesign a few of the characters for Kenner, as well as adapt a mini-series of tie-in comics for the toy line, officially dubbed Superpowers. It's weird that Kenner and DC didn't call the line Justice League. But I guess that would have been confusing given that they were using characters that weren't part of the JLA, but were actually part of other teams along with the classic JLA characters. Plus, the name Superpowers called out the main focus of Kenner's toy line, the action gimmicks of the figures. Every character had a mechanism built in that would activate with the squeezing of an appendage. For most of the figures, you would squeeze the legs together and they'd punch their arms back and forth. Alas, the resulting 80s dance fad didn't last long. Depending on the character, this action might be adjusted a bit. For example, Wonder Woman's arms came up to block bullets with her bracelets. Green Lantern pointed his ring. Green Arrow's arms aimed his bow, and Robin gave a spirited karate chop. Red Bull gives this Robin wings! Oh yeah! In some cases, the action feature was completely reversed. With Flash, Aquaman, and Brainiac, you squeezed their arms to make them run, swim, and computer kick? Look out, Batman! It's Brainiac! Watch out for his computer kick.
I am here to fix your OS.
Holy reboot, Batman! Probably best to just leave his arms alone. They're prone to breaking off. Hawkman's wings flapped, Red Tornado's legs spun around, Plastic Man's neck elongated. Yuck. You'd be hard-pressed to find a set of action figures that look better in a collection. Their display value on a scale of 1 to 10 is 20. So they look great, they're accurate to the characters, but they're not perfect. The biggest problem is the action gimmick. Kenner designed most of these so that they had permanent fists for the power punches, with their arms tucked in at their sides. Forget a dynamic flight pose for Superman, and say farewell to real posability with the arms. Because all of the figures have internal mechanisms, it's a dicey prospect to try and rotate the arms into a preferred position. Force it and the arms can get loose, or break off entirely. Even if you avoid that, the mechanisms can result in floppy hip and shoulder joints, and sometimes the feature seizes up completely. For those with solid fists, it means they can't hold any accessories, so Batman and Robin have no batarangs or bat ropes. The dubious advantage to this is you don't have to worry about as many accessories with this line. But for those characters that do come with accessories, it's a mixed bag. Wonder Woman comes with her lasso, but she can barely hold it. Hawkman and Aquaman come with weapons, as do the Penguin and the Joker. You might notice the Penguin's retractable sword umbrella gimmick echoes the early lightsabers in Kenner's Star Wars line. You should note that Green Arrow, while easy to find, is not easy to find with all of his accessories. Oliver comes with 2 arrows and a bow. Quite often the arrows are missing, and almost always the bowstring is long gone. The first wave of figures mirrored the lineup from Challenge of the Super Friends, and the villains were DC Comics A-listers: Lex Luthor, the Joker, Brainiac, and the Penguin. That first assortment was a home run for Kenner. All of DC Comics icons in one glorious figure set. But Kenner didn't stop there. They were just getting started. In Wave 2, they focused on bringing the villains of Apocalypse into the series, who were now featured on the Hanna-Barbera Super Friends show. Darkseid, Desaad, Calabac, and the Parademon were now available, as was Steppenwolf and Mantis. And they didn't skimp. Darkseid towers over the other heroes with light-piped Omega Beam eyes. The hero roster in Wave 2 is just unparalleled for die-hard fans of DC Comics superheroes. As part of Kenner's continuing effort to line up with the Hanna-Barbera cartoon, we were treated to Firestorm, but we also received a bevy of fan favorites: Dr. Fate, Green Arrow, Martian Manhunter, and Red Tornado. Their heights are unique to each character's stature, and the sculpting is spot on to the DC Comics style guide from 1982, drawn by Jose Garcia Lopez. The third and final wave of figures were starting to scrape the bottom of the DC barrel, and all of them are now pricey secondhand. A few notable entries landed. Plastic Man and Mr. Miracle got slots, though Miracle looks fairly recycled from numerous other characters. Kenner gave a nod to the Super Friends with Samurai. Fan favorite Captain Marvel was released, as was Orion. Villains in this wave included Mr. Freeze and, of all characters, Tyr, a minor villain in the Superboy comics. 2 characters were newly created for the Superpower series: Cyclotron and Golden Pharaoh. And unless you're a Superpowers completist, it's understandable why you don't care. One of the best offerings was Kenner's mail-away for the Clark Kent figure, who was designed to look like the classic Clark Kent seen in the comics drawn by Kurt Swan. Foreign markets received a Riddler, who was a Green Lantern repaint, and a kinda sorta Black Adam that used to be Superman, but officially these aren't Kenner toys. The most mind-boggling holdout was Cyborg, an absolutely gorgeous action figure with vac metallized deco that should have been at the head of the second wave due to his prominent debut in the second Superpowers cartoon series. Inexplicably, Cyborg was held off until the end of the line, as it was dying on toy store shelves. Because, racism. Cyborg remains the most sought-after figure in the Kenner lineup. With the vac metal finish and 3 interchangeable hands, as well as storage clips for them on his belt, it's a tall order finding him in good condition, let alone complete. It's a shame they didn't get to execute on some other planned figures. It's also strange that Wonder Woman is the only female in 3 successive waves of superheroes. Supergirl, Black Vulcan, Jon Stewart, El Dorado, Bizarro, Metallo, Manhunter, and the Wonder Twins are just some of the figures they had planned. And depending on which source you read, Catwoman was in the works. Some claim the Batman Returns Catwoman figure from 1992 was based off Kenner's Superpowers prototype. A lot of untapped potential in this line. But I'll say it again, God, they look great on display. I can't say the same for the vehicles. This is where comic superheroes and toy lines tend to butt heads. As a general rule, 99% of comic superheroes get around on their own power. whether they fly or swing between buildings or teleport or something like that. But when you're trying to create a successful toy brand, you need a variety of products, and that means creating vehicles for your characters to tool around in, even if the rides are stupid and superfluous, like the Mego Spider-Mobile. The Superpowers line has exactly 2 amazing vehicles, and unsurprisingly, they're both related to Batman, because Batman is the only superhero who is strongly associated with certain vehicles. The first is, as you can guess, the Batmobile. Kenner brought their A game to this vehicle, which they released in 1984, which shares the dual canopies of the legendary Adam West Batmobile, but incorporates the blue color scheme that defines the blue-gray Batman of that era and the Superpowers series. If you were born in the 1970s and someone says Batman to you, you think blue and gray first. The Batmobile was loaded with features, including pop-up headlights, a spring-loaded battering ram, and a capture claw that extended from the rear bumper to catch the bad guys. All of these tricks were at your fingertips in the center console of the vehicle. The car also had a steering wheel, even though Batman couldn't hold it. In the final wave of vehicles, we received the Batcopter, now the most sought-after vehicle in the Superpowers line. This toy is rather fragile, with a spinning rotor and a spring-loaded harpoon and cable, but it looks great. Just don't push down on its skids too hard. I wish I could say the rest of the vehicles were as engaging, but they just aren't necessary, which is why I don't own any of them. Superpowers upholds the ludicrous toy tradition of giving Superman a vehicle, with the uninspired moniker of Supermobile. If you're thinking you could justify it as an intergalactic transport, remember this is the original Superman, and he didn't need a space transport to travel between planets. The Lex Soar 7 isn't as offensive as the Supermobile, but it's nowhere close to the robotic spider Luthor pilots in one episode of the series. Again, with his power armor, why does Luthor need a flying wedge? The second series of vehicles, like the second wave of figures, focused on the villains of Apocalypse by making vehicles these characters never had need of in the series. Calabac had his Boulder Bomber, which I guess could be a mining vehicle on Apocalypse, and there was also the Darkseid Destroyer, which alleged to be Darkseid's flying flagship of ultimate evil. In truth, it was just a rickety-looking mess that Darkseid never had in the cartoon. The Delta Probe 1 is the only vehicle outside of Batman's fleet to make an appearance in the cartoon. It's a chintzy Jetson-style bubble ship, so of course Robin is given the indignity of piloting it on the box. In the third wave, alongside the Batcopter, Kenner showed us just how much it had given up with the release of the Justice Jogger.
I believe it's jogging or yogging. It might be a soft J.
On the box, Superman is sitting in this goofy walking contraption, looking embarrassed, and we're embarrassed for him.
Apparently you just run for an extended period of time.
I don't think Superman needs any help from a machine to move quickly. The guy raced the Flash on foot. The most accurate vehicle in the Kenner Superpowers fleet was Wonder Woman's invisible jet, because they never made it. It's an inexplicable decision given how iconic the famous clear jet was to both comic readers and cartoon viewers. They probably thought boys wouldn't buy a vehicle meant for a female character. So that prejudice gave us the Justice Jogger, which I'm sure was a toy aisle home run. Morons. We did get the seminal playset for the Justice League, the Hall of Justice. Modeled after the Super Friends design, the playset unfolded to reveal a landing pad for aerial vehicles, jail cells for the villains, an aquatic pool for Aquaman no bigger than a coffin, a kryptonite vault with no doors, so Supes is a dead man, a bay of computers, a working elevator that indicated 4 levels even though the playset barely had 2, a trap door, and storage bays for the figures. It was a carry case and a play environment in one, complete with the oddest of features, a stencil surface on the back to do rubbings of the DC heroes. You have to be careful with the Hall of Justice. The plastic hinges are likely to split after 30 years if they haven't already. I removed mine completely before opening the set. The various cell doors and storage rails are fragile and should be handled with care or risk snapping. Kenner did have plans for a rival playset on Apocalypse called the Tower of Darkness that would have been for Darkseid, but the playset never got past the prototype stage. Despite the high quality and eye-catching designs, Superpowers became a typical 3-year toy line. 1 year to launch, a second year of success, and 1 year of decline. Superpowers' decline is likely because the Super Friends cartoon didn't last. and bigger toy hits like Transformers just overshadowed the venerable Justice League of America. It also didn't help that in 1986, DC Comics relaunched its entire mythology after almost 50 years of continuity with Crisis of Infinite Earths. The Bronze Age versions of the characters that made up superpowers were rendered null and void. It's possible DC didn't want to support a toy line that promoted an all but erased universe. The end of the superpowers was the end of the DC heroes we'd known for half a century. Up, up, and away they went.